If you are watching this on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or even Twitch, we have a live chat over on WP&UP.org/live. We have a hallway track happening over there. So it's a really good place to come and join the conversation, come and be with the community this evening. I'm just going to very quickly run through a few bits of housekeeping before we get started this evening. But I am just going to invite my co-hosts, Diane and Leo, onto the screen to come and join me as we get started. So where are you, Leo? Welcome, Leo, and welcome, Diane. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Hello. Get a wave with the right hand.
Yes.
Already failing at the
that's it.
right side of the camera.
1 minute in, and it's all going wrong.
It's all gone wrong.
Excellent. So you are, I'm afraid, going to have to forgive us if there are any issues at all. This is only the second time we've run this event in this format, so there may be the odd glitch, the odd hiccup as we run through, but that's all part of the fun. That's what it's all about. I just wanted to very quickly mention a few things. As I said, just quick bit of housekeeping before we get started. I just wanted to mention that these events are made possible thanks to WP&UP, the team of volunteers behind WP&UP. It really does take a team to bring together these types of events and the various other things that go on within WP&UP. WP&UP is a charity that supports and promotes positive mental health within the WordPress community. And as I've mentioned already, we've had a networking call. So sorry, you may have heard this several times already. You may already be over there. But if you're not, if you're on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn, where are we? YouTube or Twitch, then it's a good place to head is to WP&UP.org/live. As I've mentioned, you'll find on the right-hand side of the video a live chat over there, our hallway track. We can see we've got a bunch of people in there already. Feel free to jump in on the conversations, have a chat, ask questions. That is the best place to ask questions for our speakers. So if you have anything that comes up, we've got two fantastic speakers this evening. If you do have anything at all that you want to ask them, we will be having live Q&A sessions. That's the place to drop them in. We'll make sure we get them, we grab them, and we'll share them with the speakers. Okay, so your hosts this evening. I'm just going to quickly introduce myself. I'm Dan Maybe, founder of WP&UP. I have been involved in the WordPress London Meetup for too many years now, and I just wanted to come on, say hello, and really appreciate the fact that all of you are joining us in these unusual times in this way. We recognize that we can often, as workers working within the WordPress space, we can often spend a lot of the day staring at our screens. So to ask you to come and join us in the evening and stare at your screen again can be a bit challenging. So thank you. Let's get Mr. Smart. He's also going to be joining us. So, Diane, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Hello, yes, I'm Diane, and I'm a WordPress developer, and I'm at the moment working at a company called Bright Talk, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of WordPress London, and I think that I've met quite a few of you there in person, and anyone that I haven't met, it's very nice to meet you virtually this evening.
Excellent. Leo, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hi, I'm Leo. I joined the helping out with WordPress in WordPress London about 2 years ago, I think, Dan. I run a design agency and delivery agency called Sotic. We help clubs and governing bodies in the sports industry to deliver using WordPress.
Excellent. Thank you. And last but definitely not least, Mr. Paul Smart. Do you want to just quickly say hello?
Evening, everybody. Paul Smart here. I run an agency just outside London, Smart Digital. We do all things WordPress and digital marketing, and I'm also on the sponsorship team for WP&UP. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, as I said, it does take a team to deliver these events. And I just want to say a quick thank you to everybody who's on screen right now, but there's also a team of people behind the scenes doing bits and pieces. So I just want to say a big thank you to all of you for doing that. Not only have we got my three wonderful co-hosts here this evening, we are incredibly lucky to have a fifth, yes, it's five, isn't it? Fifth special guest co-host, Carol Ollinger. Carol, let me just bring you up on screen.
Hi there, I'm number 5.
You are welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Do you want to just say a quick hello?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited. Yeah, my name is Carol. I think I know some people of you here, of course, and also everybody there in front of their screens. And yeah, in the past few years, I've been mainly a consultant, an event organizer, a project manager. I'm involved with the WordPress community since almost 4 years now. And I am talking to you from rainy Western Germany at the moment.
Excellent. Well, really, really pleased that you could join us this evening, and looking forward to getting into a bit of a conversation shortly about the various things that are going on in and around the community. We've got it's a bit of a damp one over here in the UK as well at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, so just quickly before we get on to that, I just want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors. If it wasn't for companies supporting WP&UP in the way that they have, then we simply wouldn't be able to deliver these events. So I just want to say a quick thank you to the WordPress multilingual plugin, Weglot, translate and display your website in different languages. Dolly, a turnkey solution for WordPress product vendors and agencies and developers. Head over to getdolly.com for more information on that. The search engine plugin for WordPress, Yoast, SEO for everyone. Again, they're supporting us by sponsoring our live stream this evening, so thank you very much. Not only have we got companies that are financially supporting these events and enabling us to be able to deliver, and it's not just these events, it's supporting the charity as a whole. We also have companies that are giving time and enabling us to be able to be here this evening. So I just want to say a big thank you to Blue 37, Paul Smart, the art is in the detail, and Sotic, the digital sports agency delivering high profile, high traffic sports sites within WordPress. Really, genuinely, I'm incredibly grateful for every single company that gets involved and supports WP&UP. It does take quite a considerable financial undertaking to deliver professional mental health support on a global scale to a global community. So we really would appreciate if you have the opportunity, if you are on wp&up.org/live, you may notice directly underneath us there's a little button that says donate. Please feel free, if you have the opportunity, if you have the ability. I appreciate these are difficult times, but all donations go directly into supporting the charity. So if you have the ability, please do feel free to use that button. Okay, on to tonight. So we've got 2 speakers coming up this evening. Really excited to hear both of these, Miriam and Chris. So Miriam will be talking to us about headless WordPress and what the potential future of it might look like. And Chris will be talking us through the process of migrating both to and from WordPress. So two very different but also slightly related talks this evening. Just wanted to make you aware that we are currently, a number of the team are currently sitting here in the UK. The UK has a bit of a routine, a bit of a tradition at the moment. At 8 p.m. every Thursday evening, we'll step outside our front doors and start clapping for our carers in this current and difficult time. So just wanted to make it very clear that in 47 minutes time, no matter what we're doing, no matter where we are, we're going to stop and we're going to honor that clap for our carers. So please feel free to join us. The screen will disappear for a couple of minutes whilst we're clapping our carers, but don't be afraid, we will be back. And I'm sorry if either Miriam or Chris, we're in the middle of your talk, but we will be just pausing whilst we respect our frontline workers at this very, very difficult time. So on to our community announcements. Our community announcements are an opportunity really to share any information that's going on in and around the community. If you're aware of any events that are happening, maybe there's you know that there's you're hiring, then now's an opportunity. If you want to drop your announcements into the community chat, and then we can get those up on screen for you. So how are we doing? Do we know how we're doing over on the live chat? Is everybody okay?
We have a closed chat that doesn't want to play, amongst other things. So
no.
if you do want to post your comments, please post them on the social media channels, Facebook and Twitter, and we will endeavour to bring those comments through.
Yes.
As we're trying to work out how to do it. I keep saying chat is closed, and whichever button I tick, it still says chat is closed. So we'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get
yes. Okay, does somebody want, I might know what the problem is there. Does somebody want to just talk about the WordPress 5.4.1? I take it, of course, we've all updated and we're all on the latest versions of WordPress,
Chat is open. Chat is open.
Oh.
Yes.
There you go. It all happened, Dan, without you even getting there.
Yes.
There you go.
Excellent.
And they're all
They
flooding
all come
in.
flooding in.
They're all flooding in. They're all flooding in. Yes, thank you very much. It's like opening the door at a pub. And I'll tell you what,
Exactly.
in a few months' time, when that door opens, this is going to be a small gathering, isn't it?
Have we promised free toilet paper or so?
We've got to. We'll be fine. We'll be fine, Carol. The orderly queuing that we're used to in this country will be gone.
Oh yeah.
A rush. Right. 5.41.
Onwards. 5.4.1. So 5.4.1 was a minor security. It was a minor release. So addressed seven security issues and 17 bug fixes. I thought interesting. This 5 of the 7 security issues were cross-site scripting issues. I don't know if we've got anybody.
And that is a really good reason why you should be automatically updating.
Yes.
If ever there was a reason to do it, and that's why I'm a big proponent of this. And Tim is an excellent speaker about this, about the fact that always updating is more likely. The percentages of chances of you breaking, this is Tim at 34SP, is so small, but the opportunity of having things like cross-site scripting are so much higher.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
That's a large number for a mature product.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. We certainly go down the route of we'd rather have a broken site that's secure than an insecure site that's not broken. So going down that route of automated updating is absolutely the route that we certainly take.
I think definitely, at least for minor updates, automatic updates is sensible.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, making sure that that you update regularly if you don't have automatic updates.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So going forward, the WordPress Dashicon project has discontinued development. Are we all aware of this? Was people aware of what's going on here?
No, I didn't know this, and that's I've been using these a lot because of doing some work with custom Gutenberg blocks, so they're quite handy.
This isn't the end of the world. What they're doing is they're removing these out so that you can use SVGs.
Are you sure, Leo? Are you sure it's not the end of the world? Because people have been saying to me for weeks. People have been saying to me for weeks, it's the apocalypse.
That's it. So these icons have disappeared. So you can still use SVGs, and they're just moving forward. So the way they did this was with CSS, and you were able to move around, and that technology. I think the point is that the technology has moved on.
Yep.
And doing this way of loading things is changed. That's the bigger thing, rather than the fact that it's going.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, it was. So quoting the WP Tavern, saying, This is so the WordPress admin font icon is now closed for new icon requests. This is after the block editor adopted the approach of using SVG icons directly. The team decided to wrap up existing tickets for new icons, push out a final release, and then pull their efforts into the new icon component.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely SVGs as we move forward. Cool. I see we've got a number of things coming through on the chat. So the hallway track as well. Yes. So, gonna keep on top of everything. Just going to keep moving forward. We have got Miriam, who's going to be joining us later, as our first speaker this evening from Stratic. But just wanted to quickly mention that actually Stratic are hiring. They've got on their website at the moment 2 full-time roles available. So if you are looking for work, then head over to stratic.com/careers. There's a couple of opportunities for you to take a look through. On the hallway track, have we got any other companies out there at the moment that are hiring? If you are, then feel free to drop details in. We'll try and get those shout outs for you as well. We had Michael was joining us in our networking session just now, talking about Frontity. And the €1 million investments from Automatic and K Fund. Really interesting solution. Has anybody looked at this as a framework for building their WordPress sites yet?
I haven't.
No.
Not yet, but I'm interested to hear about this.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
enlighten us.
yeah. So looking at the site, so it's a free open source framework for building WordPress themes with React. They aim to lower the barrier for creating fast-loading React-powered WordPress themes. So I think there's some really interesting things coming through at the moment, and certainly very excited to hear Miriam's talk shortly, talking about headless and talking about the way things are moving and the way things are changing at the moment. But it was really interesting to see, obviously, Automatic investing in this solution. There's clearly a lot of respect in this path forward. And sticking with,
we've got a couple of things in the chat there as well.
Okay.
Dan, oh, sorry.
No, go for it, Paul.
No, I was going to say we've got a couple of things in the chat there. Just to say that WPVIP.com/careers, they're hiring. And crystal.uk/careers, they're hiring as well.
Fantastic.
The only problem with the VIP one, Paul, you know what the problem with the VIP one is?
Yeah, Gary works there.
Yeah, you're going to have to work with Gary.
I'm really pleased actually to see we've got Mr. Jones, Mr. Gary Jones joining us this evening. So Gary used to be one of our...
He's off screen.
Mr. Jones is in the house.
Off screen, Dan. Off screen.
Welcome, Gary. Good to see you.
Hey, Gary.
Hi, Gary.
Used to be one of our co-organisers here. So thanks for joining us and being with us.
Come on, I'm pretty sure it's very nice working with Gary.
Yes.
Don't be mean here.
It is actually. No, it is very nice. It is. Gary. I'm not going to say anything actually.
Yeah, we all love Gary.
Lots of Gary love.
Yeah, we do really. Absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
swiftly moving on. There are a lot of events going on at the moment. A lot of free online events, which is fantastic. Obviously we're in very, very strange times at the moment, so trying to figure these events out and how we deliver them and how we bring them to the community really can be quite a challenge, but it's really fantastic to see a number of these events coming through. And following through from the React discussion we were just having, Women of React coming together. So womenofreact.com, a live event happening on Saturday. In fact, I must apologize, this has already happened.
Yeah.
This was the 25th of April.
But I think you can follow the conference online, or I think I saw a link where you can just see it, like even it has already happened.
Excellent. We've got the videos online. Yeah, I was looking. How have I not picked up? It's the 30th of April today. It's really bad.
Because every day is the same now. So.
Yes, we have to be careful to try and distinguish them, don't we?
That reminds me of a movie that my husband is loving, but I don't know the title in English. In German, it's Und täglich grüßt das Murmeltier. So if anybody knows the title in English, I would be very, very pleased to know it. It's with Bill
Excellent.
Murray, I guess.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay.
it's
Oh,
Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day.
Yes, that's it. That's it. Yeah.
Oh, Groundhog Day, yes.
That's it. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Actually, a fantastic movie.
that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, the answers fly in the chat now.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
as
Thank
Paul
you all
says,
on the hallway
it's
track.
Groundhog Day.
Yes.
3 minutes
Oh,
later.
brilliant. Okay, so again, moving on, because we need to get our speakers on swiftly. Just wanted to mention there, as mentioned, lots of online events happening at the moment. Unfortunately, also a lot of WordCamps and meetups being cancelled. We've had almost 50 official WordCamps cancelled or postponed or moved online so far to date. So I just want to say a big thank you to all of the volunteers that have given their time. I appreciate that WordCamps they take a lot of energy and effort, and particularly if you are down the road with the planning and the delivery of the event, to suddenly have to stop, it really is a bit of a challenging time. So I just want to say thank you to all of the community members out there that are giving their time to these community events. But thankfully, again, the community has stepped up. And if you visit make.wordpress.org/community/events/online, nice short URL, you will find a full list of all the official meetups and WordCamps that have moved to online events. And there's a lot. So today alone, there is somewhere, I think it's 20 online events that are being delivered today. So there's an awful lot going on in and around the community, which is fantastic. But of course, we've then got to figure out where we invest our time and spend our energy taking part in these types of events.
Oh, I saw an interesting news in the chat now from Michelle, who told us that WordCamp US will be online now. So that's news for me. I haven't heard about that yet.
No, I hadn't heard that. So that's moved online. Okay. I know
Wow.
there'd certainly been discussion on both in person and online. So interesting to hear that it will be online. Excellent. Okay. I think there may have been a link shared on that as well, which gives us a bit more information on that.
I'll try and find it.
Yeah, sure. And speaking of online WordCamps, WordCamp Europe has moved online. So that's going to be the 4th to the 6th of June. Virtual Contributor Day is happening on the 4th of June, which I think is going to be really interesting. I think that's going to be interesting to see how that pans out and how the community come together for that. And then we've got 2 half days of talks on the 5th and 6th of June. So again, a big shout out to the team for delivering that and for bringing that through. We appreciate a huge amount of work must have gone into WordCamp Europe up until this point. So to suddenly have to turn around and deliver it in an entirely different format in a very short space of time is genuinely, if I didn't have headphones on, I'd take my hat off to you. It's a huge undertaking.
Does that mean in the end that our project Head to WordCamp Europe will be from Porto to Porto? It's much less of an effort.
I think you just heard the corks popping in Scarborough when you've said that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
because we said we will ride from past year's location to next year's location. So it's going to be 2 years in a row in Porto.
That's right.
That's
well,
true.
technically, we're actually doing it from our own homes or our own venues, aren't we, for this year? So.
yeah, okay. Yeah, so for me, that's not much of a change then.
No. So for those of you out there that weren't aware, WP&UP was running a project, or is running a project called Head 2, and this year was Head 2 WCEU. We were cycling 3,500 kilometers from the 2019 venue in Berlin, in Germany, down to the venue in Porto, in Portugal. Of course, with the current climate, so we've had to we cancelled that a number of weeks ago for safety reasons, of course. So very, very sad to not be delivering that this year. But yes, we need to look at what that means for us next year.
Yes,
Can you imagine? Sorry, Diane.
You'll have to do it on exercise bikes this year. So.
Oh my God, we have to start in 4 days then. Could somebody have told me that earlier?
Dan's ready.
Yes, I'm always ready. And speaking of all of these online events, we do appreciate that these events, we're right now we're eating into our evening. We understand that. So we've talked and we've worked out and we've talked to the team and we've decided to deliver a new event for you. But this one's going to be delivered during the daytime, WPLDN daytime. So the concept here is, instead of interrupting our evening time, I appreciate some people it's much more convenient to have an evening. Our regular WPLDN virtual events are not going to be changing. We're going to continue to deliver this on the last Thursday of every month. But on the we're going to introduce a second event. So that's going to happen on the second Thursday of every month during the daytime. So 1 p.m. On Thursday the 14th, Thursday the 14th of May will be the first event. So 2 weeks today. So it's not going to be as long. So it's going to be a slightly shorter event, single speaker, and just an opportunity if you want to get on and socialize and connect with the community during the daytime. It's a really good time to come together. Okay.
Can I just mention one more meetup? I just promised the lovely people from WP Hooked that I would mention that they are also having a virtual event on the 12th of May. So
Diane,
and that's on Meetup.
Diane, who's their speaker at that event? Who's the exclusive speaker?
Someone fabulous.
So I assume that means it's Mick.
It should be Mick, but actually they just have to make do with me because Mick isn't very technical, and so I'm going to be doing a talk on converting shortcodes to Gutenberg blocks.
Excellent.
So if that's your jam.
Well, I mean that's a really good talk for WP Hook, because that's far more a really good technical talk, which is where they normally go.
Oh,
and good to hear it.
Craig's just dropped in on the chat to say PHP London also has an online meetup next Thursday. So good to see all these London events still coming together and still running at this time. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly bring up the slides. So we've been busy, shall we say? Over the last, where are we now? Almost 2 years, WP&UP has been quite a project. It's been a project that has delivered a considerable amount of support into the WordPress community in the last 12 calendar months. Through 2019, we delivered over 7,500 hours of support directly to community members. It's been really quite a journey, shall we say. The journey has literally only just started. And at this time, I want to say a huge heartfelt thank you to every single volunteer, every single person that has given any kind of time. A massive thank you to the companies such as WP&UP Dev, Green Geeks, and numerous other companies, Funnel Packs, Yoast, WP Engine. There's so many companies that have been involved that have supported WP&UP to date. It has meant that WP&UP has been able to continue to grow and continue to deliver support to the community, and its mental health support has been so important. As lone workers, as solo workers, as remote workers, we can often spend a huge amount of time isolated and having to deal with a lot of issues that unfortunately have been forced on millions of people at a global scale right now. A lot of people are experiencing incredibly challenging times and having to deal with incredibly difficult moments, and we're having to look at ways that we can support these individuals. To put this into perspective, we've had a more than 310% increase in demand on the service from WP&UP in the last 4 weeks. That unfortunately has been coupled with a drop in donations, public donations, of more than 90%. So we've seen this huge increase in terms of demand, massive increase in terms of drop, and we understand fully why we've seen this drop in public donations. But that hasn't stopped us, and it will not stop us. WP&UP, I'm really happy to say, is pivoting from WP&UP into Big Orange Heart. WP&UP is going to pivot as a charity from the specific WordPress community into the wider remote working community. And it really is an exciting time for us. It means that we can start to support a much wider network of individuals. And as I've mentioned, a huge amount of individuals have been forced into remote working and into situations right now that have meant that there are really quite difficult times, and there may be some really quite difficult times ahead for quite some time now. So please help me in getting the message out there that WP&UP has pivoted to Big Orange Heart. If you visit bigorangeheart.org, you can actually visit bigorangeheart.org/live. Let's hope. Right now, and you should see on there the chat, you should see everything going on. I've said that and I've not actually checked myself. We have spent a very short space of time building this out and pivoting into this. So please, again, forgive us if there are any issues, but for us, the focus is on the delivery of mental health to the community over getting something perfect. We want to just start doing what we do, and that is supporting our community. As I've mentioned, we have seen a huge drop in public donations. We fully understand that, and we appreciate that people are having to be extremely cautious financially at this time. But if you do have the ability to support the charity, then if you hit funds.bigorangeheart.org, we'd really appreciate that. $10 a month makes such a huge difference. It really does enable us to be able to deliver support to our community. So I just wanted to get that out there and share this with our community, share this with you all out there right now, that this is where we're heading, and it's a really exciting time for us. This had always been the intention for WP&UP to pivot and to grow into a larger organization, supporting a larger community. But given the current global climate, it's actually meant that we've taken the steps to move this forward, to expedite this and bring this to the community sooner rather than later. So I appreciate you all giving me the opportunity and the time to be able to share this with you. Okay, and I just, before we wrap up, would like us, please all say a big thank you to our sponsors. As I said, we wouldn't be able to deliver these events if it wasn't for our sponsors doing what they do. So if you hit bit.ly/WP&UP-thanks, do that in your browser right now, do that in your phone. That'll set up a tweet for you that will automatically send out the tweets. That will write the tweet for you, so you can then thank all of our sponsors automatically. Okay.
I think the new brandings are going down very well. Paul
yes.
Lacey is already ordering the new Facebook app.
He's found a shop already.
You've got merch to shift.
We have shop.
If anyone's going to be on the swag train, it's going to be Mr. Lacey, isn't it?
That's it. We all agree.
But wait until I was there, because I want to buy everything, and then you can go on.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you hit shop.bigorangeheart.org, again, everything you see has happened in about 2 weaks. So please, if there are issues, we'd love your feedback. We'd love to know if you do come up against any issues, then do let us know. As I said, our focus is actually delivering support to the community over getting this thing perfect. We'd rather come back and work through the issues at a later date as we discover them. Okay, Miriam, I'm going to invite you to the screen. Welcome, Miriam. I'm so sorry. We've taken much longer this evening than we'd planned. Thank you so much for your patience, sitting there waiting for us.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So this evening, Miriam is our first speaker. Really excited to hear your talk. So Miriam, you are the co-founder and CEO of Static, a static publishing platform for WordPress websites. You're going to be giving a talk this evening. The future of WordPress might be headless. You have in brackets there. Again, I say, very excited about where this is going. Very excited about the massive growth around the use of headless WordPress and the solution that you as a team have produced. Really excited to hear where this talk takes us.
Thank you.
So, we're going to dip out now. I'm going to bring your slides up, and then the screen will be all yours. And as I said before, if anybody in the audience does have any questions, do please drop them in the live chat. We'll make sure that we can bring them up for Miriam to answer afterwards, or try to answer afterwards. So Miriam, thank you very much for now. There's your slides, and I'm going to dip out. We shall speak shortly.
All right. Hello, London and other people, I imagine, since now we can all be part of London, even if we're not actually there. Although, of course, it would be much better to be there. But I'm excited to reconnect with the London community. It's about a year ago that I spoke at WordCamp London and had an amazing time and loved being there. So this is not quite the same, but it's a good alternative. I also, before I start, I just want to give a shout out to my parents who are online listening to my talk. Not that this is anything that would necessarily interest them, but they like to hear me talk. And so they logged on, even though here in Israel, it's 20 to 10 p.m. It's 2 hours later. So also thank you for putting me first because of that, because otherwise I'd be really exhausted. So yeah, hi Ma, hi Dad. Thanks for tuning in. If you have questions, feel free to also ask them. Okay, so we're gonna get started. So, oh, 1 second, all right, so who am I? As Dan said, CEO Stratic. I'm formerly the CEO of a web development agency called Luminea. So that's where I got started with WordPress about 14 years ago. Yeah, I've been doing this for a while. 5-time WordCamp organizer in Israel, and I've spoken at many WordCamps, Europe, US, London, woohoo, Israel, many meetups and more. And I'm also the mom of 7 children. So that's challenging during these days, but we're doing okay. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of go back to the beginning of the web and then progress to where we are today with WordPress potentially heading in a headless direction. So many of you who have been in the web industry for maybe as long as I have might remember that when we started out, we would build websites that were static. They were just a collection of files, HTML, CSS, and then eventually maybe some JavaScript, but in the beginning it was really just HTML, CSS, and we used a very fancy tool called FTP to get our files up onto the internet. And it was very exciting to see the changes that we made go live. And that was very cool. But it meant that every time you wanted to change something that had an impact across the whole website, like the navigation or anything like that, you had to do every single page over. And there were some fancy workarounds like server-side includes and things like that, but overall it was a pretty clunky process. And then anytime when I started building websites, if someone wanted me if they wanted to edit the content on their site, one of my customers, because I started to offer web building as a service, I would have to make the content edits myself for them, which was super annoying, right? Who wants to have to log in to add a comma when we as a website builder probably want to be doing something that's more interesting, and it just doesn't make sense. So then along came a LAMP server-based approach, and there were a few very popular CMSs at the time that emerged, Joomla, Drupal, and of course WordPress. And suddenly there was so much more power, and we could do so much more and do it more efficiently. And programming language, the PHP became part of websites, and so many more things could happen on a website, and we didn't have to go and edit every page every time we needed to and then FTP it up to the server. We could just go log in to WordPress's CMS and make our changes and click publish, and voila, magically our changes appeared, and we could teach that to our customers and they could do it themselves. It was all very exciting. So we could edit all the things. LAMP CMS for the win. But what happened as time went on? The web evolved, people's needs and expectations evolved, and web pages start to become heavier, bigger images, more dynamic functionality, interactive functionality, just things, JavaScript, more and more components that are weighing down websites, and doesn't help when they're running on a LAMP server, which in the beginning was super exciting and cutting edge. That server infrastructure started to kind of show its age, and websites started to feel much slower, particularly websites built on CMS like WordPress. And I'm sure many of you have experienced that. It's, there's different ways to make your WordPress site faster on a standard LAMP server, but it can be pretty challenging. In the end, what is happening is that your site is dependent on the server resources, how they're being used at any given time, processing PHP, querying the database, and there's a lot that happens every time a page is requested. It's essentially rendered for the user at that time. And yes, you can use caching, but sometimes you can overcache, sometimes you can undercache. So it's hard to get that right. And so as time went on, the web became heavier. Also, hacking went from being one person, maybe, who was like trying to breach a site to bots. And the bots know the WordPress vulnerabilities. And if any of you follow I think it actually is daily reports of new WordPress plugin vulnerabilities, or you guys just mentioned before I started about security vulnerabilities that were patched in WordPress core. It's like an ongoing cat and mouse battle where something's patched, something else is discovered. It's published, everyone should patch, but in the meantime, it's published for the hackers too. It's very hard to keep up, and sites are pretty vulnerable. The attack surface is quite wide. So what's happened? There was another move, another kind of evolution of the way that websites are built, and it's got a few names, which you've probably heard. It's called sometimes headless. It's also called Jamstack. So Jamstack is a name for the stack that was created to kind of be in opposition to the LAMP stack, but it's meant to represent a more modern stack. And that stack is Jam, JavaScript, APIs, and markup. This term was coined by the founder of another kind of, static related company called Netlify. He realized that it's not great to call websites static, even though static doesn't refer to the type of content that's on the site or whether the content itself is like interactive and dynamic. It's referring to the architecture, and the architecture that doesn't have an underlying processing server or an underlying database. But most people will hear static and be like, that doesn't sound very exciting. I don't want any of that for my website. So he coined the term Jamstack, but it's still static does refer to this type of website, and decoupled. So decoupled means that the content management system is not tied fully into the front end of the site. So these new approaches to web development started coming about and started gaining popularity among developer communities. So why are essentially, if you recall, I said in the beginning, we did static websites, and here we are back at static websites. Why are we coming full circle? So here are some of the reasons. It's faster. The pages are pre-rendered and very often, in most cases, served up through CDN. So they're instantly available, served up through CDN, and there's no processing, there's no underlying server, there's no need to consider server resources. These pages are just fast. So that's what people are trying to achieve with their websites, and they can achieve it with this. They're secure. The vulnerabilities that are related to the LAMP server and the WordPress infrastructure or any other type of CMS like that that's running a LAMP server, the vulnerabilities can be related to the core software, the plugins, theme. There's a huge ecosystem around it. It's impossible to know always that something is as secure as it should be. And then the security issues can go down into the server level, like Apache and the operating system, database, PHP, things like that. And you don't have that when the pages are basically just HTML and CSS and some JavaScript. Scalable. So I don't know about you guys, but in my agency, we would we would build a website for a customer, a client, and they were going to have some kind of campaign or launch. And so we build the site, and then we try to provision all the servers that we think it needs or prepare for it. And then if the launch is very successful, then sometimes the server couldn't handle it and would slow down or even crash, which was a nightmare. When the site is just a collection of static files, that is not an issue. It just scales automatically and instantly, and That's it. You never have to think about scaling anymore. So developers, of course, like that, and so do site owners. It's portable. You can take the data and present it in different front ends, and the front ends are flexible. And you can also bring different data sources, including using APIs into the front end. I mean, you could theoretically do that with WordPress too, but this is something that they like. And in the end, developers like it. And this is the main thing that I kind of want to be talking about, aside from that this new approach is more modern, and it's got all these benefits. A very, very important aspect of whether a technology catches on is how do the early adopters in a developer community respond to it and react to it. And their enthusiasm drives them to offer this type of solution to their own users or customers, and they share it amongst themselves, and then there can be an ecosystem that grows around it. And so that plays a very big role in whether something catches on, or whether a technology catches on or not. Okay, so what does it mean to build a site that's your standard kind of headless Jamstack website? So there's a number of components, and there's a lot of options under each component that you can use. So first of all, there's the static site generators, which build the site. And this is why helps clarify why we can go back to static without having to edit every page like we used to do. The static site generator is a build process that is smarter. So it has a templating system, and it builds up the pages based on whichever one that you use. And that way you're not like editing every single page. So it's a smarter build process. It's actually a build process as opposed to what used to be. That build process can take time depending on the platform. And the different platforms are trying to tackle this issue. So for example, Gatsby has like, it's kind of like WordPress, like we have WordPress.org and WordPress.com. So Gatsby has Gatsby Cloud. And on Gatsby Cloud, they started rolling out an initial version of incremental builds so that you don't have to build every single page. So on the one hand, what I was saying is that building a site with a static site generator is not like old school. It's not every page, but in the end, every page does have to be built. It's more efficiently done. It's an automated process, but you're essentially building every page. And so if you have a site with, 500 pages or a couple hundred pages, you're okay. But once you get to the tens of thousands, then it can become very slow and very heavy process. So that's the case right now. But these are some of the options. And then you often use a platform to serve it up or to use some of their tools. So Netlify has many tools around delivering static site generator websites, including their own CMS, which you'll see, and their own form system, and their own CDN, actually. Versal, I don't even know how to pronounce it. It was a company called Zeit, and then they just rebranded to Versal. They don't even have a logo, and I don't know why they call themselves Versal, or Vercel. Anyways, they're kind of like Netlify in some ways. They're also a platform. And then there's the version control, which is used to manage the building of the site, but also in many cases, managing the content also. So that's something that not everyone's comfortable with when it comes to content management system. And then in order to manage the content in a more reasonable way without having to use basically command line, you tie a CMS into this whole configuration so that someone can log in somewhere and use some kind of editor to edit their content. And these are just some of the options. One of the options is WordPress, which we will get back to. And just to give, I just selected from each category some solutions or companies that offer something relevant to each category. Now, what this means is that the Jamstack ecosystem is completely diverse because every website is going to be built differently, generally, or can be built very differently, because you could do Gatsby with Netlify, with GitHub, with Contentful, and then you could do Jekyll with Netlify, with Bitbucket and Strappy for the CMS. Like there's a lot of variations, and so what you end up with is a site. Each site is kind of its own entity, and it's not a uniform way of building websites in the end. There's a general concept, but it's very diverse. And just to give you an example, oh, and then of course also, right, serving up to the CDN. So you have all these categories of tools or solutions that you kind of tie together, not easily to make the website work. Just with regards to the CMS, because this is decoupled, the CMS is not directly tied into the content management. So what that means is, unlike with WordPress, where everything is completely tied together, and if you make a change and you publish it, you'll see it right away in the front end. It's not the same. It's not the case. Again, some of these tools are trying to emulate that in different ways, but it's not by its nature the way that it works. Okay, so CDN. Just to give you an idea of how many headless CMSs there are. So Netlify put together 2 sites that are basically directories of these tools. This is the headless CMS site, and you can see how many there are to choose from. So again, it comes back to every site knows what people are going to end up using. There are more popular ones, obviously, but there's a lot. And I didn't show the same thing with the static site generators, but this is a directory of static site generators. Also, many, many, many to choose from. And there's like quite a lot that are launched, new ones, pretty regularly, which is interesting. It kind of reminds me of the old days in WordPress when, if any of you were also active then, there were like new PHP-based solutions being, like open source solutions being launched all the time. And they were always like cool tools. And like I would try them out for different things. They were for forums and some e-commerce and like all different stuff. And then some of them would rise to the top. So I think this is what we're seeing in this space also. And they're ranked by most popular. Although I would say Gatsby is more popular than Next.js, but who knows? Okay, so that all sounds cool, maybe, but it also can sound overwhelming because it is. And what happens is, first of all, users have to, or builders have to figure out in 5 minutes at the top of the hour. Okay, got it. Okay, you're gonna clap. So nice that you do that. So it's quite complex, and also sometimes it's trying to use a tool that is not the right fit for many websites. And so this woman describes that experience where she, like many, wants to use static site generators, and then you start building a site with them, and they start off nice and simple and clean and cool, and then but you have to keep adding layers of complexity to make it do what you need to do. And then at the end, you're like, well, maybe that wasn't the best solution when I could have just had something dynamic powering my site. This guy is a developer, and he writes about why he doesn't use a static site generator for a site, even though he would like to. And that's the direction his companions and colleagues would think he would go in. But he said it's a barrier, like it creates friction. He said, I can't update and edit my site as easily as I can on WordPress. So yeah, I'm using WordPress. And even though it's not the cool tool, it's the best choice for my blog. So so now it's like, from my point of view, and that's what this talk is about, we're coming back to WordPress, but with a twist. And that twist, I think, is headless. What I've seen is that, from my experience also in my agency, is that there are these tools, and they're cutting edge and they're modern. But in the end, a website needs to do what it needs to do for its users, and that's enable the site manager or the marketer to edit the content and update the site and build landing pages really, really easily without having to go to developers to do it. And to add functionality easily through the use of plugins, just click, install, you're good. You can add so many different types of functionality to your site. And just WordPress has been around for so long and has such a huge and robust ecosystem that nothing really can match that at this time, in the present. So WordPress still has huge advantages that other platforms or combinations of platforms can't match in many cases, and it's continuously growing. It's over 35% of the internet now, and that number just keeps going up, which is really quite amazing. So it's got a lot of advantages, but it does have the big pain points related to security, speed, and scalability. And those do need to be addressed. And then even more so, the developer issue. And that's a big pain point that I saw in my agency, and we see now at Stratic too, which is that WordPress is not an exciting platform for developers. And so if you want to build something that's more complex or exciting or whatever on WordPress, it's very, very hard to find high level, like engineer type of developers who also have a very strong background in WordPress. It almost doesn't exist. It's like a unicorn. By the way, if you do exist, please get in touch. So it's because the developers have been focusing on these other platforms that are more exciting to them, more interesting, more challenging, more modern, more future facing. Okay, I know you're about to start clapping, so I don't know when I should stop.
Yeah, we're just going to give it, in fact, we'll get started now because we're slightly delayed on our video feed. So really sorry to interrupt your talk, but we'll certainly be back in just a couple of minutes. Our microphones will be open. And if we do have anybody else in the team that wants to come on and share the clap, then feel free. So apologies for the interruption. But if you are out there watching this, we are going to just take 2 minutes just to respect our frontline workers at this time. It's a tradition in the UK to clap for our carers. So please feel free to join us. Okay, thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt your talk there, but yes, I'm going to drop back out and we shall speak shortly.
Okay. By the way, if anyone has questions while I'm speaking, I can't see your questions. I don't know where you're all chatting. Oh, wait, there are some live comments. Okay. But my favorite part of giving talks is the questions answers. So I'm going to try to get to the end of the talk so that you guys can ask questions. So I want to hear them. So please prepare. I hope you have some. Okay, so WordPress and headless. The reason that I think that this might be the future in brackets is that also it brings a lot of benefits, which I'm going to just talk about shortly, but also it takes WordPress from being perceived as a legacy platform that is 16 years old, running on old technologies, to something that is forward facing, is modern, and is exciting for developers. And I think as a community, we need to be aware that this is something that is important for our future as an industry, that the more developers are enthusiastically participating in our project and in our industry, the better our future is. So okay, so why WordPress and headless? Okay, so we get the benefits of the headless decoupled static Jamstack site. It's fast, it's more secure, it's scalable, it's familiar, right? So you get all this modern output, but also people who are used to managing content with it still can. You don't need as many server resources because the site that's being served up is a static site. You only need, it depends on how you configure your WordPress site, and I'll just quickly touch on some different ways. But yeah, even if like your WordPress is your backend for managing your content, it's not being hit with traffic. It's only being visited by you to edit your content. So you don't need as many server resources, which also means it's better for the environment, just by the way. The ecosystem, you still get to benefit from the very large WordPress ecosystem. It's open source. It's still portable. You still can have the front end flexibility depending on how you build your site. And developers like it, and I see it in the different communities that I participate in, how they're starting to talk with a more positive attitude about WordPress. It's kind of, the conversation often goes like this: "Ugh, I don't want to use WordPress, but my customer says I have to use WordPress. Okay, but here's a way I can use WordPress that I can tolerate." Hopefully, it will go beyond tolerance and to enthusiasm. So essentially, you end up getting the best of both worlds in many ways. So one tool or major piece of functionality that enables us to do this is the WP REST API. I didn't mention WP GraphQL here, but that also plays a role. So the API makes the content portable completely. It has some issues and drawbacks, but overall, it's a really important project for the future of WordPress, in my opinion. You can push the content to any front end, any platform. It's portable and it's decoupled, so there's complete disconnect from the back end and the front end, which developers like. The cons are that there is a technical barrier. You're not building the website as you're used to. You can't just use a WordPress theme. You have to build a different front end. Frontity could be one option for this approach, which is really interesting. And there's some Gatsby themes for WordPress that have been developed, and then you would feed the content from the API into that. But you don't get to benefit from WordPress widgets, headers, footers, page builders, anything like that. Then there's no preview functionality, and you still need to take care of securing your WordPress backend wherever it's sitting. The other option is to use WordPress as a static site generator, and there's a number of interesting options out there. There's plugins like WP to Static, and then there's platforms like Stratic, Shifter, and HardyPress. So what are the pros and cons of that approach? You can use WordPress as you're used to, and it's not decoupled. I really like, I know that the developers love decoupled architecture, but I think that there's actually something very beneficial to having a monolithic architecture, because you can actually truly see what you're doing as a content manager. So I think it does have some advantages, and I don't think it should just be thrown away as something that's old. Definitely, in my opinion, is worth keeping around in some cases, or many cases. Secure, fast, scalable. Okay, what are the cons? So if you've built your site on WordPress, and that WordPress is not what your visitors are seeing, and then you publish a static replica of the site in one of the ways that I mentioned, then that static replica of the site has no underlying processing server or database, which is why it's faster and more secure, etc. But it also means that a lot of types of dynamic functionality which are built into WordPress, or you add with plugins, won't work out of the box on the static version of the site. So for example, if you install a form, a WordPress plugin, a form plugin, it won't work out of the box on the static version of the site, because that form depends on PHP and the database and other parts of WordPress functionality in order to process the form. WordPress native search won't work out of the box, for example. WooCommerce is very dynamic, very database driven, so that won't work. Membership sites won't work. So that's why, like, for example, Stratic, we've developed certain native replacements for these types of functionality. So like a site built on Stratic, if it has a WordPress search form in it, like the regular one, then while the publishing process is happening, we replace the form with an Algolia search form. Algolia is a commercial search service, which is really excellent, much better quality than WordPress. And we generate an index for the site, and we generate the search template, so everyone ends up getting search. For forms, we rolled out support for Contact Form 7 and Gravity Forms, and we plan on rolling out support for more forms, so that users don't have to replace their forms when the site is statically built. The other option or approach is to understand what it means to build a site that's static ready, and already use tools that would work on a static site, which there are many. Because of where we're at with the way that websites are built, there's a lot of third-party tools that work perfectly on a static site. like forms from HubSpot or MailChimp or Salesforce, anything that feeds into third-party service. So there are other ways of doing this, but yeah, but like it could take some attention or extra work. And there are slower site build times. Again, kind of like the static site generators. If you publish a change, then it has to rebuild the whole site. Now, one thing that we're doing at Stratic is we're creating a much more like smart publish, so that it's not so long. It still will be longer than your native WordPress publish. Oop, I see my change, but anyways, but it's a challenge in this approach also that it's important to understand. So bottom line is, I think that if WordPress is going to have a future, and I think it does have a future, I think it could continue the way that it is, but it can continue in a stronger way with a continuously growing and enthusiastic community if it starts to take more modern approaches in ways that make sense. WordPress is all about reverse compatibility, right? So the LAMP architecture is not going away anytime soon, but what can we do to take what we have and what we can change and still bring it into the future so that it's an exciting and interesting platform, and also in a way that we can try to resolve or work around these major issues related to speed, security, and scalability, which is how modern websites in general are being built now. So we need to kind of keep up with the modern web, and I think we can. And I think there's some really exciting, interesting projects being built by people and deployed and released, and it's really interesting to see what's going on. And I think we're going to see more of that. And I think it means that hopefully, I think it does mean that WordPress has a very bright future. And yeah, so I think the future of WordPress has to involve or should involve headless. Interested to hear what you think. Would love to hear your questions. That's it for me. Thank you.
Miriam, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to give that talk. There's so much really interesting stuff in there. It really is a fascinating space, headless, and where this is going, what it has to offer, where we go as a community with it. So really, really appreciate that. We've had quite a number of questions coming through on the live chat. So if you're happy, we're going to dive straight in with some of the questions.
Yes, would love
Excellent.
to. Excellent.
Leo, do you want to dive in with this?
Yeah, so certainly. So the first question is about the fact that, as you can see, it feels like headless WordPress is also the way for developers to wrest control back that the users are gained with blocks. What's your side and feeling of that?
So I don't see like the developer versus user relationship being one of like I control, no you control. I hope it's not like that. But I think that it's important that both types of users need to feel happy with how their site is being built and used. So that's why I kind of have a problem with the standard headless WordPress deployment, where the front end has nothing to do with the back end. That means that that you can't use a page builder. And we can see how important page builders are to people based on the SaaS types of website builders that exist and are popular, like Wix and Squarespace, and based on the success of Elementor. I mean, their success is crazy because why shouldn't people be able to build their own pages out on their own, on the fly, and have amazing results? So I do have a problem with that approach. And I hope that as we move forward, developers, I work with a lot of developers and I'm developer-y myself. So I know that developers tend to not always have empathy for the end user.
Yeah,
Their empathy is for like the code.
I think we have to recognize that the reason that WordPress is so popular is that the ownership of the layout has been to some extent handed to the user so that the user can actually use the sites. If it wasn't
Totally.
a user-friendly product, then it would be very difficult for the users to use. So I think I would agree with you on that. Paul?
So yeah, next question. Where is the future for static sites and e-commerce? I'm sure it's possible, but I have a feeling that it's also quite hard.
That's an excellent question. So we have been testing headless e-commerce solutions, and that also exists. It's a very exciting time for all these types of headless solutions or JavaScript-based solutions that work well on static sites. So we have tested Snipcart and Ecwid. Both are great solutions. Ecwid had a very seamless, easy integration process with WordPress. And then what you end up having is you can run unfortunately, WooCommerce suffers from speed issues. It comes up all the time. And with Ecwid, you end up with a headless or a static site, which is fast, but you can manage it from within the WordPress admin, which you're familiar with. So you get like a nice hybrid type of site there. So we're going to be testing more tools. I'm just talking about this one because we happen to have just done that. And with regards to WooCommerce, so for us as a company, we have support for WooCommerce on our roadmap, and we have some ideas about how we'll support it. I think WP GraphQL will play a big role in our ability to support it, and also WooCommerce's ability to run as a headless website. I think there's a lot to be done on that, and it's not going to happen anytime soon, both for us and both for the community. But that's the way it can be done. Yes. So yes, the answer is it's complicated, but there are some really interesting tools out there that that are continuously being developed, and I think can be a solution.
Diane.
Excellent, Diane. Do you want to take this one?
Yes, this one's from Chris Brosnan, and he said, "What are your thoughts on using WordPress as a headless CMS for only blog post content in a microservices structure, serving only that side of a larger site or web app?"
So it depends on the scenario. If there's some, okay, so I'll give you an example, which isn't exactly this, but we have one customer that's a very large e-commerce site, actually. Sorry, 1 second, child. Yes, more. Yes, sure. Give me a kiss.
This is the joys of doing this.
Yes, it's bedtime, is it?
I was talking to somebody about this. The fact that our real world, we were so used to our business world and our real world being two separate things that we don't see our real world, and this has given us an opportunity to see everybody's real world, which is great.
Yes.
Yeah, we keep saying that on every call. I love seeing people's kids running around, across the back of the room or something. It's so cute. It is nice. Yes, we all have real lives outside of our very professional, demeanor.
It's not so cute when your husband accidentally walks in, on a video chat before he's got dressed in the morning.
Yeah, that's less adorable.
I guess that was an insight that probably wasn't needing to be shared, but there you go.
Yeah. So far that hasn't happened to me.
Go back to Chris's important question.
Yes, to Chris's question. Okay, so I'll give you an example of, so we have a customer that's a very big and very fast growing e-commerce site, but their e-commerce is actually some proprietary e-commerce system that they built. But they have all this marketing content around it that's all managed with WordPress. So they put the WordPress content with us and the e-commerce, which all looks like it's part of one site, on their own servers and still running there. There are definitely scenarios where it could make sense to run part of the site as some kind of headless WordPress or maybe standard WordPress. I didn't quite understand. While some other parts of the site are running different systems. Depends on the use case. But if it's a regular site and it has a blog in it and you're running it as headless, I don't know why you wouldn't already just do the whole thing, like using WordPress for managing the content, because it is basically the best content management system around. So, but again, it depends on the scenario. So it could go either way.
I think that leads into Richard's question about how do you envisage WordPress core improving the headless sides of things in the future?
This is just on this. We're running a little bit short on time, but I just also wanted to flag up that Gary has also asked a very, very similar question about WordPress core, and I think it's a really important one.
That's a good question.
So just wanted to flag that up.
I get the feeling that the REST API is not a priority in the WordPress project. I could be wrong. Okay, so it's lacking in some ways. That if it was reliable, I think that could help. It also, as a site gets slower, as a site gets larger, generating the JSON can be quite slow. and that is an issue. What could WordPress core do to help make adoption easier? That is a very good question. Okay, here's just one idea. So if there was more messaging around theme development and plugin development, where the developers were encouraged to develop so that sites could be static when they use a plugin, because there's many cases that we've seen, like for example, one of our users came and they were using a table plugin. Okay, now it's just a table, it's output, but it was like you doing Ajax calls or something like weird, and like it doesn't have to be there, it wasn't adding value, but it meant that that plugin couldn't be used on static. So if developers were more like static or headless aware, then they would be building things already so that they're ready for it, and then users wouldn't have to work around it or scrap it and use something else. That might help. That's just one idea, but that's a good question. I'm going to be thinking about that.
Interesting. That's come up a few times in this chat. It's clearly on a few people's minds. Unfortunately, we are running very short on time. Leo, I'm afraid we're really running short on time. I'm really sorry, but we've got another speaker to bring in, and I apologize. It was our fault. Obviously, we overran at the start of the night. But I just wanted to just say a huge thank you to you, Miriam. I really appreciate that it's much later for you this evening than it is for us over here in the UK. So thank you so much for giving your time tonight and giving this talk. It's been fantastic.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's so fun to hang out with you guys. I had such a good time in London. It's really nice to see friendly faces. So thank you.
I just wanted to very quickly mention before you go that if anybody has been out there, and I know several people have, we've seen donations, we've seen shop purchases coming through with us. Thank you very much. If you visit bigorangeheart.org, I'm really happy and proud to say that it is actually hosted on Stratic. The team have been absolutely phenomenal in the last couple of weeks. I really could not. I can't praise them enough. The support has been absolutely fantastic, incredibly responsive, and you probably noticed if you hit bigorangeheart.org that the site is quick. And you think that's running a WordPress backend, that's running the static front end, and it's an incredible platform. So a huge round of applause to what you've achieved with Stratic as a platform.
And well, okay. I mean, huge congratulations to you. So thank you, and we're very happy to support in this way. So it's our pleasure, and yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Okay. We shall. Speak soon, Miriam.
Thank you, Miriam.
You so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.
See you. Bye.
Okay, I am just going to invite Chris Brosnan onto the screen. Chris, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you for your patience. Waiting for us to get started. How are you, Chris?
Very well, thanks. Yeah.
Good. Good. Excellent. Okay, so just quickly going to introduce Chris. Chris is a London-based self-taught full-stack developer with more than 10 years' experience. Very much looking forward to this talk as well. There's some really interesting symbiosis here. This was never intentional. We didn't know this when both Miriam and Chris were booked on, but we've done an awful lot of work with moving sites recently internally within the WP&UP team. So interesting that we've got obviously Miriam talking about static, which is the route we've chosen with the website, and now Chris coming to give us his talk, migrating a site to and from WordPress. So Chris, we're now going to duck out, hand it over to you. If anybody does have any questions at all, then please do drop them in the chat over at wp&up.org/live. And similarly, as we've just done with Miriam, we'll try and answer as many of those questions as we can. So Chris, thank you so much, and over to you.
Okay. Right, so as Dan mentioned, this tonight's talk that I'm going to give will be on migrating a site to and from WordPress. So, I've done it in both directions before. So I have had sites on WordPress that we've moved to other platforms, but also I've worked on sites on one of many platforms that we've moved the other way, so to WordPress. But what I'm going to talk about, it applies, I would say, whether you're dealing with WordPress or not. But I've tried to make it specific to or at least consider the things that you would specifically need to consider when moving a WordPress site. So let's get started. As Dan said, very quick introduction. London-based developer. Have 10 years experience, and really more as a hobbyist coder. I've always liked to tinker with code and see what I could do with my computer and see what cool stuff I could create. I've worked in charity, property, travel, fashion, and finance sectors as a developer, and worked with many different technologies, both in terms of actually, building solely on that platform and also moving from one site to another from different platforms. So I'll just get started now. So why would you migrate your site to a new platform? Well, there's several reasons why you might do this. So first of all, you may it may be because the site that you have, perhaps initially you realize that initially you perhaps made the right decision was not made early on to put it on a particular platform, or more commonly that I see being the case is that the use case has changed because obviously websites they do have long lifespans, hopefully, and their use cases do change, or they should change over time, but the changes that happen may actually be a change of use case, or it may be a change of business activities, which means the site itself needs to change in some way. So, and it could also mean that perhaps the underlying technology is not supported anymore, which has been the case in some instances. But there's many reasons why, and I'll just go through some now. I'll say really though, to be honest, avoid it if possible. Now it may be odd considering what the focus of my talk is, that I'm saying to avoid it if possible, but that doesn't mean it's never a good idea. There are times when it is a good idea, but I say to avoid it when possible because it's very easy, particularly for us developers, it's very easy for us to maybe think, oh, we could make this site better by moving it to this framework or this CMS or this platform, because really we want to work with a shiny new thing. But in actuality, that may not necessarily be the best to do in that case. And it may be best to actually refactor what's there. But as said, there are times when it is a good idea to do that. These are what I would say as good reasons to move a site. And in cases where we have moved a site to a new framework or CMS, this generally falls under these reasons. So if the primary purpose of the app or site has changed, so suppose you had a site that was purely a blog and had some small e-commerce functionality, but then you needed to extend it with more features like user-generated content, and perhaps it took in more like social media or social network type elements, which personally, I believe every web framework and every CMS, it has its strengths and weaknesses. WordPress is no different. Drupal's no different. React and Laravel are no different either. So it could be that the primary purpose of your app or web application or site has changed, so you'd need to consider a new framework to move to. Or if you, on a related note, if you need to add new features that are not supported by the current framework or CMS. Technically, you could say that, any web framework can support any feature, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily the best one to use for that. Like technically you could use Magento to build a blog, but that doesn't mean it's the best tool to use for that, and it doesn't mean it's a good tool to use for that. So that's a very crude example, but that's just one way of looking at it, where just because you're using that tool currently, or you have used it, or it's good for certain things, doesn't mean it will be good for everything. Or another reason could be the underlying technology is no longer supported. So there are some open source projects in the past which have unfortunately lost the support they had. So they are no longer updated, or it's been a very long time since they're updated. They lose a lot of their community, and they become very hard. They essentially become abandonware. There are quite a few cases of that. Obviously, you could still use those platforms, but in that case, a lot of the support will be on you, and it will essentially be a CMS you'll have to maintain and add to the core yourself. Or if it's a framework, it would be a similar case. You could migrate a site to correct past errors in architecture planning. So obviously, websites do have a lifespan, and they do change, and things are added to them, and things become more complex. And we often may not, and for good reason, we may not see that early on. It may be that when the site was originally built, it was originally built for a different purpose, or it could be certain misjudgments were made because of perhaps client demand or stakeholder demands or stakeholder expectations. Maybe certain corners were cut. We've all done that, and it's very easy to do that. But then this is why I say with building any web app or website, you should try and plan ahead as much as possible, or try and build it in a scalable way as much as possible to avoid this. But that doesn't mean that doesn't happen. Or you could migrate because of long-term cost considerations. I have heard of many use cases where a Magento shop has been moved to WooCommerce because the shop itself was pretty small, and it was not really cost effective to have it on very complex hosting for Magento. So, and lastly, the CMS or framework could no longer support the scale of the system. This one's a bit rare because it's probably more down to hosting more than anything. But yeah, it's probably more down to what hosting you have on for your site or app. But then it can also be a use factor. A few reasons why you should not migrate a site. So, as mentioned, if you just want to try a new technology, we all want to try new stuff, and we all want to see if we can learn these new frameworks and new technologies. But that does not mean we should just convert all our current sites to that, or it does not mean that we should just assume it's going to be good for all use cases. As a developer, I'm a strong believer in not attaching myself to one technology, and I'm a strong believer in using the best tools for the job, whether it's a current system or not that's in use for a site. Also, you should not migrate as on a whim or as a rush decision, or on a related note, as out of frustration with the current system or its architecture. There's been, I've seen a lot of WordPress sites and sites on other platforms where particularly maybe people editing the site have certain frustrations with it that really could be easily overcame with just some tweaking of that system or some further development of that system you currently have. So yeah, you shouldn't move to a new platform just because of frustrations with the current system or its architecture, because if you do that, you may just be transferring that to a new environment, because if that's the only reason, you cannot guarantee there will not be frustrations with that next environment. And on a related note, for short-term convenience, in the agency I'm a part of, they used to have a bit of a reliance on just building WordPress sites, which is not a problem. I love WordPress. We all do. It's a great platform, but there's a difference between using it for a large website and then using it for a large multi-scale application, which I think they took the approach of thinking it was convenient in the short term, but then not really looking ahead in terms of if they made it a headless WordPress, or if they decoupled it, or actually tweaked it a lot more, or even just served it as part of the application, then it probably would have saved more time in the long run of actually tweaking it and so on. But again, that's it's not just with a CMS. There's certain frameworks where sometimes I've seen developers just jump to that for a short-term consideration. Both in cost and in time. So in terms of cost considerations, there may be the concern, particularly from a hosting perspective, where hosting our particular framework or platform is, quote, cheaper. But if that's just a short-term consideration for cost and not looking at the overall architecture, then that's not necessarily going to mitigate that, or it's not going to necessarily help in the long run, because it could mean further work, further resource cost, and so on. And as I mentioned in the last slide, if you're using it to just correct problems that could be resolved without migration. So if for example, if someone wanted to move a WordPress site because they had the perception that WordPress was slow, or they wanted to move away from Laravel because they felt it couldn't do e-commerce, then they're both things that could be easily resolved without migration, without moving the whole content across. But as mentioned, there are cases where it's a very fair point to migrate a site, and this is some of the things I'm going to cover in the following slides. So to start with, I'm going to talk very briefly about if you're going to migrate from WordPress and also to WordPress. So to start with, if you're moving from WordPress to another CMS or framework, so you see here we have in the logos like React, Laravel, October, Vue, Drupal, and Joomla, but it doesn't matter which. It could be any one of any number of frameworks or CMSs. If you are migrating from WordPress, all the following still applies. But I'm going to give 2 use cases of when I've done this and the reasons that me and my dev team actually did this. It's one of the sites we currently manage. We currently manage development for ongoing. It was initially built on WordPress, actually, but it was a website for where users could go and they could buy Bitcoin SV for a Bitcoin SV wallet, which is a fork of the original Bitcoin. So it's a very simple site, actually. It's essentially a one-pager. Although there's the navigation at the top, that's just the different sections of a very long one-pager. So some of the reason it was originally on WordPress, but I did have some reasons why there were a lot of problems with it being on WordPress, which wouldn't be the case with other sites. And there are a lot of scalability issues I saw with it being there. And but the biggest reason why I initially decided to move it was because really WordPress was kind of overkill for it, because it was a one-pager. There was no blog content. There was no other than what's in that box to buy the Bitcoin SV, which was actually a component that we just plugged in. So that was an external component which we actually plugged into our site through an API. So just go through it. We moved from Vue because the site was a one-pager, but we wanted a framework that could start small and scale up as needed, which Vue is perfect for that. It famously is a JavaScript framework where you can use as little or as much as you want in your project. And also I felt from a logistics point of view, the fact that it was a one-pager made the migration to Vue fairly simple. We essentially took what the templates were in PHP to make that one-pager theme and split that up as much as possible into individual Vue components, and then piece them together to create the one-pager. And for the content, it is content that rarely changed. So we didn't need really a large CMS for that. So we went with Cockpit, which is a headless only CMS that we use for the content. And yeah, as mentioned, there was essentially 3 reasons why we decided to migrate. It's essentially a one-pager, so I know many people disagree with this and disagree with me on this, and that's totally fair. I totally see arguments against it. It was a one-pager only site, so from my point of view, it's wasting a lot of what WordPress had to offer by just taking one area of functionality And again, it never had a blog, and it was never going to have a blog. That's just not the kind of site it was. But on the other hand of things, although it was a one-pager, it was a lot of the plans going forward are for it to go more into a web application territory, which meant that building it as a JavaScript application actually served a lot more of the purposes going forward. The second of the two use cases of going away from, this is another what we've also done at our within our agency. By the way, I meant to mention in the introduction, the agency I work for, a lot of the sites we build are actually in the crypto and blockchain technology space. So that's why 3 of these use cases from recent are based around that. So the second one was CoinGeek Conference. It's a conference based around blockchain that's ran twice a year. So this is a recent screenshot, but usually it's when it's time where tickets are on sale, you'll see buy tickets section on there, and upcoming speakers and agendas and so on. Again, that was built on, it is still built on WordPress. If you visit there, it's still on WordPress. But I decided to, me and my team, we decided to migrate it for several reasons. It was very complex to begin with. It was relying a lot on third-party plugins and a lot on, and there was a lot of different variables in terms of the events and in terms of how we serve them that was becoming very complex. In theory, yes, we could, there are other ways we could have overcome this. But then in terms of the overall plan with these sites, with this one in particular, we were splitting it up into a microservices architecture. So we're using Laravel as a ticketing system, front end on Vue, and for the content elements, Cockpit again. And what we're going to plan to do, I mean, we haven't actually started development on this, so I've just been planning it going forward. We're probably going to start development probably in a couple of weeks. And we'll deconstruct the current site layout into components and import the data into the CMS and event ticketing system. Just a note on data migration, that is probably the most complex part, actually, in terms of moving from one framework to another, because you'll find that often these frameworks they store things very differently. A lot of these CMSs store things very differently. So, for example, very, very famously, if you migrate from Drupal to WordPress, you'll find that the table structure is immensely different. Drupal has a lot more tables. If you are on Laravel, you'll find it's a very if you've got a very small Laravel app that you're using databases on it, it'll probably be very few. In that case, I would say you just need to really understand the database structure of both frameworks or both CMSs, and it could be, to put it bluntly, it will be a lot of work in many cases to actually sync the data, and you will need to do some custom scripting for that, which is why in one way you should be totally sure that you actually want to move from one to another, and trade off the work that you put in for how it will benefit later. So just go back to this. I'll get back to that in a moment. Yeah, on this case, the site was going to rely on third-party plugins, and again, a blog was never going to be a part of this site. Now, I know it might sound like I'm just saying blog, but I'm not thinking of this in a way where WordPress is for blogs, because that's not the way I see WordPress. I see it as more for very content-heavy sites, which really these two were not. Now, that's not me saying that you only can use it for them or it's only good for those, but I think in light of all the other considerations that we had for these websites, it was not something that really was a reason to keep it there. And from a logistical point of view, for this particular site, there was a lot of this was part of it that really brought the control back to the developers in terms of keeping the quality high. For this particular site, there's often been a big problem with a lot of snap decisions for changes, and its structure presenting a lot of instability and risks going forward. So we felt that if we used a framework where we had to actually structured it into scalable components, then it can mitigate against a lot of this much more easily. And lastly, we are using WooCommerce on this site, but it did not really handle in our system. It did not really handle the sales or ticketing very well. We did use Foo Events, which actually was a great help. But then because our stakeholders wanted also to accept crypto payments, there was some issues with that had to be tweaked a lot and had to be kind of over-engineered, I would say. Which again, we got there, but looking at going forward, it seems like we'll probably need something more scalable in terms of how we're going to go about these situations. Now, it might sound like I'm very anti-WordPress. I'm really not. I love the platform. I like it's good for a lot of different use cases. It's just in these 2 use cases, I felt it was not. But now I'm going to talk about 2 cases where we moved towards WordPress from other platforms because it was the better platform for that. But first, there are alternatives to moving away from WordPress, which actually is what I would always opt to go with first of all. I would rather opt to go with an alternative because of the impact on developer time, if it's feasible. If I would only go for complete migration if a lot of that work actually does save a lot of time in the long run, or it seems like it will save a lot of time. Oh, pardon me. So, as Miriam discussed, one particular alternative, which I'm very interested in, is going with the headless or decoupled CMS architecture route for WordPress. So in that case, you would have just the CMS standalone on its own, and then either headless or decoupled where it's served elsewhere. There's a lot of very exciting stuff being done in this, a lot of very interesting stuff being done in this, I'm taking a lot of interest in, and I'm myself and keeping a close eye on it. The other alternative is multi-site, so where you have one WordPress install, but you separate it out into subsites. So if you have a very large site, you can split it up into subsites where you have only particular plugins in use in particular sections. You have admin users only having rights for particular sections and so on. And then that's or you could refactor the custom theme or plugin code. So again, if it's more of an issue with code health, that can easily be dealt with in that way. Or you can use a developer theme or plugin that's built on other technologies, for example, React, Laravel, or Vue. Or go with a microservices approach with WordPress as one service in a bigger service, in a bigger system. This last one is not, there's not many cases where this is necessary, but only if you have a very large application. I worked in finance as a developer previously, and there was one application where we did use WordPress to serve just one small part of it because it was a very large monolithic application, and everything was split into technologies we use in different areas, were feeding different areas of that application. So very quickly, I'm just going to talk about the, because I know we're a bit pressed for time now, I'm just going to talk about the cases where you would move to WordPress. So the first one was actually on my personal blog. I actually had it on October CMS, which is a CMS fork of based on Laravel. And I moved it back to WordPress because a simple reason, really. it was just difficult to maintain and add features. I mean, I could do that, but when I spend my whole day writing code, I don't necessarily want to do that on my own blog also when I get home. So, and I just wanted minimal need for maintenance. As I said, I could have added more features and code to my blog, but then on my personal blog, I literally just wanted ease of access and just wanted it to work. So there, it's pretty simple. I just exported the blog content and restructured the export file to match the WP posts and post meta tables. And I rebuilt the theme in WordPress, deactivated the default plugins, and stripped out unwanted features. Second one is also from from my current role, where so this was Bitcoin Association. We moved from Laravel to WordPress. What we did for that, we recreated the theme in WordPress, and so initially headless WordPress was actually being used for the blog content. So it made and also for the pages. So the blog it made the migration actually very simple, because we just rebuilt the theme and then moved the stuff across. We decided to migrate because it was initially a social networking site or professional membership site, but then it was rebranded to news resource and portfolio site for members of the industry. So this was for professionals in the crypto and blockchain industry. And the content was a bigger drive for the brand. It was no longer interactive, and they didn't need as much in terms of social interaction. And the benefits of because of that, the benefits of Laravel were no longer needed. So WordPress was actually a better system at that point for that. There's going to be 6 very quick points of what you should do. I'll try and speed through them. In either case, if you're going to or from WordPress, you should do the following. Research your options thoroughly. There's multiple options for your project to be built or moved to. Research the pros or cons and weaknesses of each. Like, for example, WooCommerce, great for enterprise level e-commerce, but demands huge server resources, very steep learning curve for most developers, and often overkill really for small sites. WordPress is great for blogs and content-heavy portfolio sites, but may not perform. You can build interactive web applications on WordPress, but it would require a lot of work normally out the box. So you should really think carefully if you're going to do that. Plan ahead. So break the migration into smaller tasks. Database, refactoring templates, setting up a staging and dev environment, and setting realistic deadlines. When setting these deadlines, allow adequate buffer room, because when you're migrating, things will take longer than you expect. Ensure good working knowledge of both systems. If moving between similar frameworks, even if moving between similar frameworks, there will always be differences between them. So don't assume that this is like that in this system. I made this mistake when I was moving from Drupal to WordPress in one use case. I assumed they would be similar. This was early on when I did the first migration, and it was not the case. Use online resources and expertise within your team or network to fill gaps in knowledge. There could be members of your team who've worked in these technologies before. So if they have, you could use them in some of this. Have contingencies in place. It may go wrong, and you may find that a migration to a particular platform is not the best option. So if you do make mistakes, which we all may have errors of judgment, have an exit or reversal strategy in place. So make it in a way where you're never too far down the road that you can't go back if you need to, or that you can't go down another turn if you need to. Take your time. So taking your time, I honestly believe if you take your time in a project, you'll save more time in the long run, and it will prove to be more efficient in the long run. Minimizes bugs and room for error, and avoid taking shortcuts, because more often than not, these will always cause problems later on. At least in my experience, I've always found that. And the last point, reach out to the community on either side or both. So most CMS systems and frameworks have communities that offer support and guidance to its members and its newcomers. Such as Meetup groups, as we're in right now. Other resources, Stack Overflow, GitHub support boards, Stack Exchange, etc. And as mentioned, alternatively, there are meetup groups where you can learn more about the CMS or framework and technology by meeting people currently using it and asking questions about it. More often than not, I've found that people are very helpful in these spaces. So use them if you can. So thank you, and that's all. Happy coding.
Chris, thank you so much. Really appreciate you giving your time to give your talk this evening. Fantastic, so many points in there. To be honest, there was certainly some points in there that I could probably have done with hearing a couple of weeks ago when I decided to migrate the current WP&UP site. So thank you very much. We've had a few questions come through. I hope you're happy. Do you mind taking a couple of questions before we wrap up?
Yeah,
then?
sure.
Excellent. Okay, so the first one, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, I think, came in from Richard. Does anyone ever go from WordPress to Joomla? Which was then rapidly followed up by MPW 1989. Done this once a couple of years ago, never again. Is this something that you've had any experience with at all, the migrating from WordPress to Joomla at all?
No, I have to be honest, the last Joomla site I worked on was probably 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have worked on a Drupal to WordPress conversion. No, a WordPress to Drupal, which was we actually went back on that because we realized early on that it was just not feasible. Mm-hmm. It wasn't my idea to do that move, but then we found it was just not feasible. So in terms of Joomla, I've never done that migration, no. Mm-hmm.
No, and then Elliot, we got. So this was a long one, so I had to post this in the Slack. Unfortunately, we're limited to the number of characters we can get on screen. But Elliot said he feels tired to WP in some cases, as over the years, I think I've overdeveloped a site for a project by using WP. The thought of moving away and redeveloping a site would concern me because A, probably would cost too much, and B, I'd have a job convincing the client to rebuild something that currently works. Do you have any thoughts or advice on that at all?
Well, that's a tricky one. I think from a technical point of view, if you can tweak it enough where it's not over engineered to work well, then WordPress could be fine. But I've seen this is something that commonly happens where as more features are added, it's got over engineered over time, and it becomes very a kind of a mishmash of just code and plugins and so on. But if it can be tweaked in a way where you can minimize this, I mean, possibly speaking to a client about going headless could be a thing. But then I guess what they mostly want is the editing interface. I don't know for certain, but it seems in most cases they just want the intuitive editing interface. So it could be going to a headless structure, could be an option, where you serve the actual site with blocks and just use that as a content repository.
Okay. Do you just a question? Do you find that there's a lot of work, a lot of discussion at the moment around Laravel and various other PHP frameworks? Do you feel the migrations to those platforms are kind of worth undertaking? Depending if you're dealing with a fairly small site, I mean, what would be an indicator?
No, for a small site, no. I'm a huge fan of Laravel. It's my favorite web framework, but it's not good for everything. And it's only good really if you're going into web application territory, not if you're building, a client's portfolio site. Or you can definitely do that, but it's probably overkill for that, and it's a lot of server resource and a lot of it's like using it's kind of like using a sledgehammer when just a regular hammer would be as much use. It's it'd be overkill for most portfolio sites or most small client sites. But then if you're building an application, then Laravel would probably be the best way to go.
Excellent. Okay. And where was it? We had another question come in from Chris. Yeah, Leo, did you want to grab that one?
Yeah. What was your view on choosing a CMS for an e-commerce store where the brief is that they plan a small store, but hopefully scale quite quickly?
So I guess you need to kind of have some idea of how much they have an idea that they want to scale, if it's possible to get that information. Because if they're going very big, then Magento, but then most e-commerce sites wouldn't need Magento, in my experience. It's for very, very large scale e-commerce, like enterprise level. But then again, it could be a case where if they're going with WooCommerce, they might need it finely tuned for their use case. Or there may be other platforms you go with, like BigCommerce is one that's actually I've heard quite a lot about recently. So it's like a headless e-commerce system. So there's other options you can explore, but I wouldn't jump straight to Magento unless you knew that they were likely to go on that scale.
Yes. Excellent, Chris. I'm afraid can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, something's going on odd on my machine. Chris, thank you so much. I'm afraid we are running rapidly out of time. So I just want to thank you for giving your time this evening. Apologies that we overran a little and haven't had quite the amount of time that we normally would for Q&A, but I really appreciate you giving your time tonight. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us, the community.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
No worries.
We will see you
Thanks,
in the
Chris.
Zoom room after this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Chris, excellent. So we're going to drop your video now, and we're just going to quickly wrap up. And as Leo's mentioned, we'll head into the Zoom. So Chris, we'll speak shortly. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks, Chris.
Carol, bring you back in. Hello.
Hey.
Hey.
Welcome
thank
back,
you.
Carol.
Welcome back.
back,
who
Carol.
have we lost? No,
That's
sorry,
it.
too many.
We're all here. We're all here.
Too many screens going on at the moment. Okay, so we're just going to quickly wrap this up. There's a few things I just want to really quickly cover off, but before I do that, actually, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for being here this evening, for giving your time, enabling us to have this event with our community. Carol, special thank you for obviously coming on and being our first guest co-host. It's been a pleasure to have you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You're very, very
Thanks,
welcome.
Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay, so let's just pull these slides up, and then I just want to say a very quick thank you to our event-specific sponsors. So Weglot, Dolly, and Yoast. Really appreciate you supporting WPLDN in the way you do. The feedback form is open. We've adjusted the feedback form slightly for virtual events. No data is collected. We just want to know what your thoughts and feelings are on the structure, on the format, whether it works for you. We just like to know whether or not we want to continue delivering these events in this format. So if you could hit wpldn.uk/feedback. As I say, we don't collect any data. We just want to know what you think of this style event. A couple of save the dates now. So the next one will be the next WPLDN. So our next regular event such as this will be 28th of May. We are planning obviously to have that as a virtual event given the current climate. So that your feedback is important. If there are things that we need to adjust, want to improve upon, then we'd love to hear from you. But we also have a second save the date now that we have WPLDN daytime. So 14th of May at 1 p.m. We'll be sharing the details through Meetup. So you can join us over there on the middle of the day if the evenings aren't quite so convenient for you. We're now going to head over to our social element of the night. Our Zoom URL, a Zoom link is on the screen. There's also a thing running along the bottom there with the password. So please do come and join us. This is a much more casual, much more social event. It would be great to have you all come and join us if you can. I think we've had how many? We've had quite a considerable amount of people joining us over the evening. Really appreciate all of you on the chat. Lots of conversation going on, lots of questions. Big thank you to all of our speakers, of course. As I said, big thank you to all of the team that are here with us right now. I think maybe a few of us deserve a drink, don't we?
Yeah,
Oh,
I think
yeah.
Diane
Yes.
deserves a drink.
Absolutely.
I definitely deserve a drink.
Can we help her?
Should we,
Can
should
we
we
help that?
pass it around? Here we go. Carol, yeah, pass that one along.
Wait. I'm gonna rub it. Ah,
Go on then, let's have a drink over
there
there.
we go.
Hand it over to Paul.
Paul, can you take it from me?
Yeah,
Oh, I think I can grab that from you.
No,
Hold
no,
on.
no.
My
Can't see my
fault,
screen.
Try again, Paul.
My fault. I'm gonna give it to you.
Yeah.
Like this. You see it? It
Other
comes. It
side,
comes.
Paul.
It comes. It
Does
comes.
the
No, I
other
can't
side
do it.
or
That
other
way.
side?
That way. No, it's not working.
The other side.
It's not working that way.
Yeah.
Hey,
There it comes. There it
go
comes.
on, we can get this drink to Diane.
Yay!
Yeah.
Hey, you know,
Oh, I changed its
then-
color.
Pass it up
Fantastic.
to
Leo.
Leo.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there
excellent.
you
go,
go.
Leo.
It's all
Over to
coming
you.
together.
Diane, are you ready for your drink?
I'm ready.
You're ready. Excellent. Go on then, Leo. It's a well-deserved drink, isn't it?
Oh,
Oh,
oh wow, that's not what I was expecting.
It transformed again. Amazing.
Cheers. Cheers.
Wow. I think we maybe need to stop now.
I think we've
It's
achieved.
that time of the evening. Yeah.
It is. Yes.
It is the apocalypse. So
No.
absolutely.
Okay. As you said, we're on this Zoom chat. The Zoom chat is now open. It is going to be much more social, much more relaxed. So please do come and join us. It's great to have you in
more
there.
relaxed than this is kind of terrifying.
See you on the other
Horizontal, I think.
side.
Thank
You're
you
looking
all
for.
very much. And as always, we look forward to seeing you in, 2 weeks' time instead of a month. Thank you all. Speak soon.
Absolutely.
See you in a few minutes.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night. Bye.